Yep. So it's a Sunday, 12:24, and we are live. That's a fact. Now, yes, we are live. And yeah, Stewart, hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
One sexy lady told me recently I should allow the guests to talk more. Zanda. And yeah, that's why I'll just make a short introduction about you as far as I know. So, a British citizen, Hungary, living for the past 20 years, off and off, but since 2005 permanently. And you are basically badassing around startups all over Europe as far as I remember. Poland, Hungary.
Something like that.
Probably everything in between. So, what brings you to Latvia?
Well, I'm a country representative for Climate Kick in Hungary, and I became a rep because I was doing stuff with Climate Kick, which, if you don't know, is an organisation started by the EU to promote startups and education, innovation around clean tech and sustainable stuff. Since the recession in 2008, there's been a lot of problems, as everybody knows, and the EU thought that if we want to help employment, we need to promote innovation, education, and other things. So they have 5, but I think there's going to be 7 of these knowledge innovation centres, which is what the KIC part stands for. And there's different competencies, for example, climate, education, materials, food production, and energy. And I'm involved with the climate one and also the energy one. So yeah, that's how I got involved with those guys. And they have 2 programs, one called Pioneers, where people kind of do an internship and they get them to go to other countries. And they also have one called The Journey. And The Journey takes masters and PhD students, and they go on a journey to 3 locations, every 2 weeks a different country, and they have boot camps. They get formed into groups, very, very diverse from everywhere in the world. They don't have to be European citizens, they just are students who are studying in Europe. So we had people from China, Australia, India, as well as all the usual suspects from Europe. And so the reason I came to Latvia is because they had 2 of the streams ended up in Latvia for their final 2 weeks. And at the end of their 5-week program or 6-week program, they have to have created a virtual startup. So they have to have figured out a business plan, organized themselves into a team, figured out the costings, everything, and pitch this to a jury. And that's where I came in. I was one of the jury members, having more than 10 years experience with different small companies and startups now. And I was at one of the panel judges. There were some from the technical university here. There were other people from parts of the Climate Kick organization. But everybody had their own kind of competencies in this area. There was myself and one Latvian gentleman. We were the kind of entrepreneurs who are like on the ground doing it. So yeah, that's how I came here. That was on Wednesday night. We did the competition on Thursday, and I think there was 80 students totally. So it was kind of mental. It was a very, very intense day. 16 teams. They get 3 minutes to pitch, 5 minutes of questions from us, and then 5 minutes from the audience. And yeah, I think they were very, very pumped at the end of it, because it's the culmination of an enormous, intense process. And I haven't heard a bad thing said from anybody though, because usually with every situation you can't please all the people all the time. But in this case, it seems there wasn't a single person who had any regret. They apparently all loved it. I was only involved for a day, so I went to the technical university the following day to meet some of the guys and have a bit of a celebration with them, because they have a winding down party. And because I've never been to Latvia before, I decided to delay my flight, extend my stay a little bit, so I can at least have a look around the city for a few hours. And I've really had only 2 quick looks at the city so far, but I have to say it's very nice, and I know enough now that I have to come back for a longer period, I think.
Oh, you're just too kind, right?
No,
You're
it's
politically correct now.
actually it
Oh,
may
it's
be.
a wonderful city,
No, but
wonderful people,
It's what
oh, the weather.
it's what a lot of people might say, but as a Brit, I wouldn't probably say to anybody, even if it were true, that this is a city and I hate it. But I wouldn't say the positive things either. So, but it genuinely, I can see, you can go places and you find some places you think, yeah, it's okay, it's nice, and there are other places you look around and you go, yeah, this is nice, but I could actually live here. This is the kind of atmosphere, and it's hard to put your finger on it. It's hard to know, but some places are livable and human, and other places less so. What I like about Riga, I think, is there's some similarities to Budapest for me. You have the water and a few little rivers and things. You have some nice parks, and you have lots of really cool old buildings. So the architecture and all that old stuff is really cool, because I've been to some other Eastern European countries where there wasn't so much of that left. There was a lot of huge block flats and all of the really not such appealing stuff. But you have all of that history here still. And yeah, you may have some of the new stuff too. That's not a problem. But you didn't rip out all of your old heritage in order to put some of that in.
When you arrived to Riga or to the technical university, did you get some form of crash course about history or anything
Not
like that?
at all, no. So
at least about the university?
No, I didn't go to the university for the event, actually. They held it in... it's like a studio building next to the big market.
The central market?
It's opposite, right next to the water. It was warehouses for the market, I was told.
I know what you mean. Speaker, probably.
Pardon?
Speaker.
Yeah, I think that's it. And so we were there for the whole day. Obviously, when I arrived, it was so late I couldn't see or do anything. But I wanted to be ready for the early start the following day. So, yeah, I didn't go to the university, and it's not... The university's a partner for Climate Kick, so they were involved in that respect. This was the first year that they've done anything here, but I can say that they did a pretty good job, so they had a flying start. And
was the catering good?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, for Climate Kick, the theme is everything's vegetarian.
Oh,
yeah, I'm not 100% keen on it myself, but
you just get hungrier
for one day. For one day I could live with it, but those guys had to do it for 6 weeks, and apparently, for the whole, it's the theme for the whole thing. So
they'll be smarter and lighter.
Apparently, I think probably through lack of sleep as well. I think that speeds up your metabolism as well, doesn't it?
I suppose so.
Combination of vegetarian and no sleep and
then just the stress added.
Yeah, and partying as well. When they needed to get rid of the stress, they were probably moving quite a bit. So
you have an interesting position, because you can compare probably British drinking habits, Hungarian drinking habits, and at least a little bit you got a glimpse of some local Latvian.
Well, we were when I did go out for a few hours. It's hard to say, because I was right in the middle of the old town, so I don't know how many Latvians are there. There was at least maybe 30% of tourists and other backpackers and students and so on. And I was with there was 80 students here, but only probably 30-40 went out when we went out that evening.
Was it on a Thursday?
On Friday.
So yeah, now school is starting.
Right, that was when it was really busy. So the Thursday night, the student guys all went out on their own, and I know they partied hard, because you could see the next day, and they organised at the university for a later start, because they realised that they were definitely going to be having fun. But as you said, I was told the 1st of September everybody was back in school, and so Friday was really, really busy in the town.
How is the calendar for school in let's say Great Britain?
Well,
Is
it's
it
been
similar?
been
1st September?
It isn't
till
specifically 1st of September usually. It usually starts on a Monday, so it would either start like a day ahead or a day late or whatever it takes usually. But that's as I recall, because I'm old and it's been a long time since I was in school.
And how is it in Hungary?
In Hungary, it's they usually keep it around the 1st of September, but they do it like a couple of days before the weekend, and it's like a soft start. They get them to go to school, but the real school begins like on the following Monday, because if they start on Thursday or Friday, I don't think are very intense in the very early days.
Yeah, human nature.
Yeah, it's probably a smart thing to not expect too much the first day back, right? Especially because in Hungary they have longer school breaks than we have in England. We probably only have 6 weeks, and in Hungary I think they have like 10.
Wait, you mean during the summer you
Yeah,
have
the
only
summer
6
break.
weeks?
Yeah, they have.
Wow.
They have
How
like,
come? We have 3 months, June and August.
No, the way it works is that there are several breaks during the year as well. So you have you have a break at Easter, you have one in the autumn, but you also have
and Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas, and you have a few days here and there for half term, which is like a semester. You'd have a mid-term,
Maybe
a little break.
Weeks.
So I don't know if it's in the whole year much shorter, but it is shorter for.
It sounds like it would be shorter because we have the same, just plus 3 months in the summer.
Okay. Well, and it takes a bit more to get used to after 3 months of no school, going back to school, eh?
I suppose.
Shock to the system
I
alone.
suppose. But
But
everybody gets acquainted.
Kids are not bored with 3 months of no school?
It's a day and age of the internet and mobile devices. So
Well, it is now. That's
I
true.
would guess no.
Yeah.
I would guess no. But who knows what the
But
kids
I think
are doing.
the other difference is in Hungary there are millions of summer camps, and so kids can go and do all sorts of other things. But when I was a kid in school, I don't remember there was any summer camps for us anyway. Maybe there are other parts, but it didn't happen for me.
How was it actually growing up in Britain
Well, in my case, I can only really say how it was for me.
compared to your kids now in Hungary?
Big difference, I'd say, because, and I wouldn't say it's a difference between England and Hungary specifically, but
Really?
just my background. So I'm a farmer's son. I grew up on a farm, and of course that dictated an awful lot about how my childhood was going to be. Whereas my kids have grown up in Budapest, the capital city, and my ex-wife, I'm divorced now, her family were all very highly educated professionals. So her grandfather was a policeman, a lawyer. Her grandmother was a very highly respected mathematician. Her mother was a professor of economics at the best university in Budapest. Her father was a bank treasury director. So they all were doctors or minimum master's grads. In my case, I'm the first one, the black sheep in the family. I've gone and got educated. I didn't want to be a farmer. I moved away from home, and not just a little bit. Because a lot of my family all live in the same county at least, and they've not really travelled very extensively from there. Some other remote parts of the world are occupied by our distant relatives. We have some very distant relatives in Canada, Australia, I guess that's it. But yeah, our direct family, they were just doing the same thing for probably centuries. I don't go back that far, but
And still doing?
not now. Farming has always been hard, and when my parents retired, my brother wanted to get a house, and if you want to get a mortgage, you need an income, and being self-employed is pretty difficult to prove your income. So he became a property developer. He was just
Sounds nice.
started out building, physically doing the work, and he's worked his way up, and so he has a business doing that now. He still owns a little bit of land, but it's a hobby for him now. because you just can't make money at it.
So he's a developer in England?
Yeah, yeah.
How's it going?
It seems to be good for him. He's not like a huge property developer. He basically works on mostly existing houses. When the recession came in, there were a lot of people who couldn't afford to buy a new house, so they decided they would change it, extend it, renovate it, or whatever, and that's kind of a specialization for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and he's done pretty well for himself on his own properties. So he bought one property. It had a beautiful view, but it was pretty small, and he just expanded really a big way. And I think he doubled the price of the property by doing those sorts of things. And he did it all at the weekends and evenings.
Oh, so he sold it for almost double.
Yeah.
Ah.
And then he could afford to buy this place he has now, which has some land as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my family. I have a sister as well. She stays living in the same town where my parents are. So yeah, as I said, I'm the black sheep.
Do the family members consider you almost a black sheep?
Well, they know I'm different,
Oh.
but different in what way, I don't know.
Mhm.
So it wasn't necessarily appreciated when I was much younger. I don't think they really understood why and what was the situation, because I know that my mother thought that what I do was kind of easy and it wasn't like real work. Because
What you do?
not now, but at the time when I
Ah.
first left home,
Okay.
she didn't understand that. I think she thought that real work is labor and that's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to give her an example because she was the one who handled all the taxes and all the paperwork for the business.
Mm-hmm.
But she hated it, as everybody hates paperwork generally, but farmers and people working in those areas absolutely loathe it because they want to be outside doing things, and firstly they have to be stuck inside and it's bureaucratic and it's very tiring mentally if you're not used to it. So I had to explain to her that that thing you do once every quarter and hate, that's pretty much what I do every day. And she got it at that point that it's it's mentally tiring, not necessarily physically tiring.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and I think they've seen they were very proud of me when I got my postgrad, because first person in my family to have a degree, but then I went nuts and I have 3 now, so that's
Are those complementary or
yeah
different?
well so the first qualification I have is in electrical engineering and electronics, so I had plenty of technical knowledge, but in order to stay working in Hungary I felt that I needed to complement that with some business stuff, because I've been doing lots of management jobs and consulting and business, but everything's paperwork in Hungary, so if you don't have the paper, doesn't count. So I decided I would go back and retrain a little. So I did a MSc in IT management first,
Mm-hmm.
which was not so far away from my core competencies, but it was basically how to take a nerd and make him able to have more business acumen and know how to communicate with other people, because geeks tend to have a lack of communication skills in some cases. So that's the purpose of that particular degree. After that, I just felt that there were gaps in my knowledge that I could use filling, because I already had my own company, and the MSc IT management course is like a sort of, it's an MBA but focused specifically at that industry, and
Mm-hmm.
it lacked in areas if I wanted more general. So I did the MBA. It meant I could get some credits from the first degree course, but fill up the other gaps, which were more general, so more HR related and leadership stuff, a little bit more detail on the finance and economics.
Can I ask you, can you turn on the light?
Sure.
Thanks. So economics.
Yeah, it was very, very small amount of economics, just enough to have flavour. So the old MBA seems like a Swiss Army knife to me.
Ah.
It's not the perfect tool for everything,
Yeah.
but you've got, one bit of everything you might need. At least afterwards, you know all the concepts, so you can go. You said about the internet, that is such a huge enabler for societies everywhere in the world now. If you've got access to the internet, what stops you from pretty much teaching yourself anything?
I suppose cute cats.
But it can be a distraction.
Cute cat videos. That's the biggest obstacle.
Well, yeah, and other things that are related to cats
Sure.
that are on the internet that might distract people. Not me, of course. I would never look at such things, but I've heard
Yeah.
stories.
Allegedly.
Exactly. So yeah, you can go away afterwards, and if you like a particular subject, focus on it and stuff. So for me, startups, I've had my own company since '98, but then I was doing consulting.
Oh man, I like the word consulting. It's just that nobody can explain what that mostly means.
Yeah, well, mostly there's two
You
kinds
make
of
a presentation and you get money.
It's like, I'll give you the general definition. Can you lend me your watch and I'll tell you how much it is, and then charge you for telling you. So,
well then.
but there are kind of two sorts of consulting that I see. One is just basically contracting, where you pay somebody to come in and do the job, and there's the other one, which is where it's more a question of some knowledge that doesn't exist in the company, and that you need to have that person temporarily come in, either advising you or changing the structure or something, and then they go away again, or they help you and the business to move in another direction that you couldn't move in otherwise without the help. Or actually, in a lot of cases, it's a question of having a third eye outside looking in, whereas when you're so close to a problem, you often can't see the wood for the trees, as we say in England.
It's meant as an expert.
It depends. I mean, expert is, as I said, there's the two sides. One is an expert. That's the textbook definition of what a consultant does. But in reality, you often find that it's just you need more manpower in a skilled way, of course, not labouring usually, and therefore these consultants are brought in to do extra things. And I've done both sides, I guess, to some extent. Mostly what I was doing in the early days and how I ended up going to Hungary was I worked at a company, American company called Unisys, and I was designing the branch system for OTP Bank, which was the National Bank of Hungary. And it was a very, very big project. So after I come up with the initial design, we did some pilot testing, and then I was helping them roll it out. I think it was 420 branches all over Hungary.
How big is Hungary population-wise?
Around 10
10
million, something like that.
So 5 times Latvia.
Right, and Budapest has got about a quarter of the population in it. So it's 2.5 million around in Budapest. But that's the other funny thing, I look at Riga specifically in Latvia, and I see some similarities in Budapest, but I think the centre of Riga looks kind of the same or bigger to some extent to the centre of Budapest. It's a little bit different how it's organised. So Budapest is very much more spread out in terms of the streets. There's no centre in the way that you guys have.
Really?
We have Váciuta, which is one main street that's right in the centre, but then you have all these distributed bits around that are little hubs, as it were. Whereas if you go to the old city here, and I guess I don't know if it's just because Budapest was much smaller very long time ago, whereas here perhaps it was always bigger and it just didn't grow as much outside, because a lot of the population in Budapest, it's miles and miles around, just suburbs, as it were. So it seems much bigger and there's a lot more people, but there's not the same centre that you have like here.
Well,
So it's an interesting contrast.
Because we definitely have some parts of the city just as separate parts almost. that
Well, I haven't
everybody
seen
can
those yet, but I guess the
divide
business
them.
area, right?
But center is yeah, a big chunk, that's
Mm.
for sure.
But I'm imagining, because I can see that there's some very much more modern buildings, and I've heard there's this like business area which is more like that.
Probably you could call it that way. It's still developing, so
Right.
at what point it's suitable to call it that way? Yeah, it might be the already time to call it the business. Yeah, because it used to be just pasture, just fields for pasture,
Yeah.
and yeah, during the past 10 years, it definitely got developed more for I don't know some banks, some probably car dealerships or something like that. So yeah, it's getting there.
Right. Right.
What do you think of Hungary as a place to live compared, let's say, to Britain? I know that the economy should be totally different in a way that, all right, let's say if let's say if a apartment in the center would cost me this much, in Budapest it would be a little bit different.
It's hard for me to say. When I lived in England, I didn't ever live in London. I've always lived in the southwest of England, where prices are quite different and the whole environment's quite different from London.
Mm-hmm.
Now I live in the capital city of a smaller country, but the other difference is in Hungary, the whole structure of Hungary is if you're a business and you're not in Budapest, you're nobody, because a quarter of the population lives in Budapest, and it's basically like a spoke and hub thing where you have all these other smaller cities and stuff, and obviously things do happen in those places, but the mentality is that Budapest is the place where it happens, and that's, if you go to university, there's a very good chance you probably go to Budapest to university, even if you're from one of the other cities. And that's just not true in England. A lot goes on in London for sure, but you have other big cities too, and it's not necessarily the case that the centre of everything is London. So you have Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, and then up in Scotland you have Edinburgh and Glasgow. So depending on where you grew up, which region, there are different competencies. So for us, where I grew up, the two big cities would be Exeter and Plymouth. Exeter has a very, very old history. Plymouth had, but it was bombed almost completely in the Second World War because it's a Navy base.
Oh.
The Marines are based there. Not far from where I grew up is Dartmouth. There's a small town where
They all sound like cars.
naval officers are based in Dartmouth. So it's a different kind of environment, really. Houses down there are certainly cheaper than London. I have no idea about the London property market, and I haven't lived in the UK either for a long time, so it's kind of tough to know. Apparently the property market in Budapest is booming like mad now.
Now?
In the last couple of years, it's...
How come? What did you do?
I think because interest rates and everything's been so low in recent times, and when people are scared, they go back to the old stuff they know works, and property usually in the very long term, you're good to go. So if you can get yourself some property and rent it out, then
Is it more for the locals or some foreigners coming in?
There were lots of foreigners in the past. A lot of them have actually gone now. There was a lot of Irish people and so on buying property in the past, but they basically got their fingers burnt because they tried to just have locals managing it, and there was all sorts of tricks, as I heard. So
You mean from the locals?
yes.
So what would be the impression of Hungarian people? Do they have many similarities with British or other European nations, or are they really culturally very distinguishable or different? in a way.
They are different for sure, but
Really?
but that's true in England too, depending on where you are. So you can't say it's a big generalization to go all British people are like this. I know people always do.
It's still more safe to say, for instance, oh, British people, Czech people like to, German people like to drink beer, for instance.
Yeah, but
It's
that's
safe,
not true.
It's a safe bet most of the time.
I
Of
think
course, you
it's-
have those exceptions, but hey,
I was
come
going
on.
to say the thing is, it seems to me that it's because of preconceptions are based on things what you've heard, and it can be like the scandals side of things. For example, you could say the Dutch or the British are all football fans and hooligans, and that they drink a lot, and they go to Spain and they party and.
Well,
you
they
know,
like football. Come on, they like football.
I'm British, hate football, hate all
Well,
sports.
it's not that. It's not
so-
that interesting nowadays. I mean, it
Yeah,
used
but
to
it
be a
never
time
was for me. Never
Oh,
was.
really?
Never was interesting. And maybe this is
So,
why
what sport do you like?
some people think that I'm not really English because I don't like football, rugby, cricket, tennis. I don't like watching any of these things really.
Yeah, me too.
I don't mind to play them a bit.
And I'm not British.
Yeah. And I don't have a bowler hat or an umbrella, which is the other thing they thought I should have.
That would be stylish, though.
I could use it as a like an
Be
icon.
you'll be a top hipster with that one.
I'll just walk around in foreign countries with my top hat and my umbrella on, and
And-
carry a briefcase, and then
And it gets you eyeballs.
and a back. I'll just put a big Union Jack, and then they'll know that must be an English guy.
Agreed. Agreed.
So yeah, what's the differences? I don't know. Things. It's a hard thing to really pin down, I think. And the other problem is I've been there so long now. I'm wondering if I can remember what my first impressions are, and I'm not sure even if they still are all the same or they've changed. One major thing I would say, and I don't know if it's specifically Hungary. I was talking with some Latvians here, and they were saying that people in some Eastern European countries are generally more I wouldn't say miserable, but
Soulless.
they don't want to smile and have fun and stuff. And we were discussing this, and we thought that there's like a 2-tier system at the moment where many of the younger people are less inhibited in this way, and that obviously travel makes a huge difference. Many more people can travel around different places and cultures now than they used to, and I don't mean just because of the changes in the politics and that, but we have all these cheap airlines now that make travel really possible for anybody if they have enough time. If you're not so picky about the dates you want and how and where you go, and backpacking is always an option too. You can just pick up your bag and go that way. And if you're a student, you don't need. It's not a money issue anymore as much as it used to be. I'm not saying it's not an issue at all, but then you have the old guard guys. Especially, it seems to be more when you go to the countryside rather than the capitals of most of these countries, where their families are still very much in the old way of doing things and so on, and obviously it must have an effect on them too. And it was evident to me from some people's profiles on Facebook. You see everybody's doing selfies and all this other stuff, and then the contrast is these other people who are, if you get a smile at all, it's like the Mona Lisa. It's like they don't want to ever acknowledge if they're happy. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the case in England. I think people would be more open generally there because
There should be.
it's like more what you see is what you get. I know there's this idea that English people are more diplomatic and everything else. In the part of the UK where I'm from, I would say we're much more straightforward. And that's probably from my background as much as it is from the region.
It probably depends on whether or not they are interacting with locals or foreigners, right?
I think it's also a class thing. When you're dealing with there is still a class system in the UK.
When will be the time that you don't have
The class system?
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Because that's just an artifact, right?
Well, it's still there. It's absolutely ingrained in society. You can't avoid it.
But it's getting less. I mean, it used to be probably much worse.
There's grayer lines between working class, middle class. Those two, they merged to a continuum, but the upper class is still the upper class. And
what do you think about the Queen? Do you want actually to Britain to stay? What's it
monarchy?
called? Yeah, monarchy, or actually change the status, change the structure?
Most of the people I think who don't like the monarchy, they're just the kind of petty, jealous people.
I mean, it's useless.
Well, it isn't. It isn't useless, and I'll tell you why. These people typically are these kind of working class that would be able to go out and take money from the state for not working and think that there's whatever they can get is good. But because they have that mentality, they also think that the Queen doesn't do anything and gets given a lot of money.
Isn't it true?
No.
Oh, teach me.
Teach
me.
Okay. They get paid a certain amount as monarchs, but if you look at the buildings that they have to maintain and so on, which are basically state treasures.
Well, all right.
So I mean, if we
old
did
buildings.
No, it's not just this, but the Queen has her own income. She's one of the richest people in the UK.
I mean, the royal family should have some pretty good assets on their own.
Yeah, but actually, it's not the royal family. They were poor as hell a few generations back. It was like around, I think, Prince Albert's time when they started the stock market. They got involved right back in those days, and I think from Victoria onwards, they really started to make decent money. But the one thing that was wrong and has changed, they never had to pay tax in the past. So it meant
because they are the ones who you pay taxes to.
Well, no, there's a difference between state and the monarchy now. They're the head of the church. They're head of, but our democratic system.
I suppose the Queen would argue just whose face is on the money, huh?
She could say what she likes, but
get away with
the
your
law
taxes,
applies to them too. And secondly,
peasant.
they're a figurehead, and so when they form parliament, they still go and get her to approve it. But it's a formality and a technicality. She has really very little real power. Only the same kind of power that everybody else has, which is
just to moan and groan.
And well, anybody who's got enough money can usually have influence on things, whether they're the monarch or not. And if you have enough, you have significantly more influence. But I think what people tend to forget, and one of the things that that we get from the monarchy, and since I've now done my business degree, I recognise it where I wouldn't have recognised it before, is a kind of branding. And if you remember back to the British Olympics that just happened a few years ago, they really emphasised there are certain iconic things that we've already said about, the bowler hat and the thing. If you go to England, you're looking for the British bobby, you're looking for the red buses, the red telephone boxes. There are certain iconic things which are considered British, and the Queen is one of them. And so when the UK is trying to get a contract in Indonesia or somewhere, I don't know, some foreign place, one of the things that used to happen was the royal yacht would turn up, and one of the royal family would entertain serious people and help smooth over the stuff. So it was
politically active.
Yeah, and it's diplomacy extended, and a lot of the diplomacy these days is more about business than it is anything else.
Yeah.
So they had duties, and from what I understand, the Queen even today works really long hours. I don't know what she does.
Come on, man. Come on.
She's not cooking and cleaning, okay? That's sure. But the other stuff, I don't know. I think so.
So you would be more inclined to actually leave it as it is?
I don't see that it's an issue, to be honest. I think the amount that we pay if we pay anything at all, because now she pays taxes.
That's really a shame.
The Queen changed.
I was hoping you'll go some conspiracy routes with the royal family.
Oh, well, they're lizards or whatever it is.
Whatever, yeah. Go with David Icke.
If it's true, she's doing a bloody good job of hiding it. But no, I think we get value for money from the court. So what they've had some reforms anyway. So now there would have been a much more extended royal family, a lot of hanger-oners, and of course, who knows what the hell they did, and they were getting money for nothing, perhaps. I don't know. But that's been changed in recent times anyway, so I don't think there's nearly as many. There's just like a core of the royal family who get anything at all. And then, the Queen changed voluntarily because there wasn't any laws passed, but I think they're much more savvy now to what the population say and think, so they voluntarily pay taxes. And of course, she's got quite a portfolio of investments.
How can you pay voluntarily taxes? Is it possible?
I guess, at least...
there has to be a tax that you need to pay.
Well, it's income tax, it's called. But she had, before, a exemption.
Oh, so they willingly...
Pay it.
No, I mean, they willingly just made the exemption not apply to them anymore.
Right. Yeah. And so, at the end of the day, she is paying her taxes now, and I see that really what little money we pay for these things, we get back in other ways. But people, I think, are a little bit short-sighted and don't always see that. And it's always the case if these kind of people who are anti-monarchy tend to be the kind of people who are like jealous types. They just don't like to see anybody else who's doing better than they are if they can't have it.
Well, I mean, if the royal family would be some high achievers, I'm not sure, but they are just the royal family. That's the point. You are royal just because of a birthright.
True, but that's true of everything.
So
I'm who I am because of where I was born.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just that the people might as well not just criticize the fact that they are high earners. They might as well just criticize the fact that they are earners because they earned by birth.
But that's true of anybody who's the child of somebody with shitloads of money, isn't it? Bill Gates' kids are the same.
I'm not sure, because Bill Gates has pledged, right, to donate it, and mostly...
So why couldn't the royal family do the same?
But they won't, right?
Well, who knows? They could.
Yeah,
we've had a king who abdicated.
Who?
What was his name? He married a divorced American lady and abdicated. And,
But still, he probably lives fine.
He may well have done, but, that would apply to anybody in those circles. If you were
it's definitely not a fairy tale. Oh, I was so in love, I'll just give up everything.
No, but this is the thing as well. It works both ways. If you're born into the royal family, you may not want to be in that situation, but you have no choice.
In the 20th century, for sure, you don't want to be in the position because revolutions are going on everywhere. And I mean, the Russians just murked them, right? But in the 21st century, it's so sweet to be a royal, probably, because you can, if you have the money, oh my God, you can just go around the whole world doing whatever.
Do you think that's what they do?
I expect them to do that.
Yeah, but they don't, do they?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure.
The
Britain,
downside.
I'm pretty sure
just do what you like.
I'm pretty sure British royals are different in that respect. But I would guess at least the Spanish and Greece dudes, they would be
I don't think
totally
they can
bananas.
either. I think they could try, but think about the oligarchs or anybody else who's got a shitload of money in a short time, and they can party and do what they like. Berlusconi, he has a bad reputation. But if you're a royal...
He's just an Italian.
Yeah, okay.
An Italian with money, that's always the same combination.
But if you're in a royal family and reputation is everything in those sorts of circles, you can't...
Talk to Prince Harry about
exactly my point. These guys try a little bit every now and again and they get in trouble.
Society anymore. I mean, nowadays, think of it this way. people consume so much information in, such a short amount of time nowadays. It's just another blip in the total flow of information. So if Prince Harry wants to show any Nazi signs and go naked somewhere, all right, maybe for an hour or so, people will, oh, look at that. But in 2 hours, they'll forget it. It's just the attention span is so little nowadays.
It's forgotten.
It's a bliss.
It is forgotten for a while, but usually you find these things keep coming back up. So if he does one thing, he'll get away with it.
Take Trump, for example.
Yeah.
At one point, nobody even cares about it. You have an official position, and that's it. And yeah, there was something in the past, but oh my God, there was this and that, and who keeps track? Nobody.
Well, they have kept track, and now he's being indicted, isn't he? So,
in what way?
Well, they're starting proceedings against him, aren't they?
No, not really. They'll just talk politically, of course.
I think
the opponents will talk about it, but
even he's
no risk. He has no risk of getting impeached or anything.
I don't know. I have a feeling that there's so many people against him. He's done some stupid things he said he was going to do, but he hasn't done an awful lot of the other ones, and I wonder if he's just simply trying to placate his own party because they didn't like him either.
Oh no.
And I assumed that once he got in power, it would be a short period of time where either the Democrats or his own party would find a way of getting him out, or maybe it's just some assassination attempt or something would happen, and he'll be pushed aside, I think, sooner or later. Or he's being used as a pawn because,
now we're talking David Icke again. Yay.
It's like he's a clown nobody sees. It's with a magic act. The one hand is showing you something here, and the other hand's taking the money out of your pocket or whatever. And right now, there seems to be a lot of this stuff going on in the world generally, and so who knows if...
politics is always theatrics.
Yeah, I guess.
For sure. But that's why Trump is one of the best politicians, because he has the best theatrics.
Yeah, we've had a professional...
So great.
We've had a professional actor before, and so now we have a clown.
And I think, well, why a clown? You can call it politically correct, an entertainer. He's an entertainer. He's a salesman, an entertainer. He knows what allows people to react to certain things. And he actually doesn't care if something slips.
No, he should say he's a comedian, because comedians can say politically incorrect stuff and people laugh. But
that's the Brit talking in you. Everybody can say that. You don't have to disguise yourself.
No, but what I'm saying is that when you go on stage,
it's free speech for everybody.
I know it's free speech, but you know what? Free speech isn't free. It never has been.
It is. That's why it's called free.
Well, you tell the Nazi party that. Do you think they can say what they like?
Oh, well, free speech was after them. So, yes, nowadays for the Nazis.
Or anybody else. In the UK now, you can't really say anything about a lot of things. Otherwise, you're told that you're inciting violence or I don't know what.
So it might be the case that you actually need to differentiate between the way how you say it. Yes, you still can say it. Everybody will understand what you mean, but you need to choose your words in a way that you don't, let's say, threaten directly anybody, but still you get the message.
It's not even threatening necessarily, but if you're there's one thing which is the words you use, and the other thing is the way you deliver those words.
Sure.
And that's why I said, like the comedians. I just watched on Netflix here, Jimmy Carr.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is so offensive to a lot of people, but he is a comedian. Everybody knows he's a comedian,
yeah.
And when they go to his shows, they know what they're going to get, and so they can't really say anything, and it's accepted. But if I were to go on the street and literally quote some of the things he said, I'd probably end up in jail.
Well, but many times comedians do get some backlash for what they say. It's just that
I was going to say there
are so many hypersensitive people nowadays in the social media world. It doesn't really bother.
Political correctness has gone a little bit overboard, I think.
It's just something that people with too much time have, and that's it.
The problem is that we've gone past how it was when we were children in school. One of the things you have to learn in the primary school, when you're really little, is that kids pick on other kids, and they're really rough with each other, not physically necessarily, but they call it, anything that looks different. If you have, I don't know, different color hair or anything, it's used. So as a parent, you have to teach. Good. It isn't necessarily bad. It's preparation for life. What you have to do is teach your kid to ignore those things, not to rise to it, because you choose if you're offended or not. But it's only in your head.
But aren't most high achievers privately schooled, or homeschooled even, or Montessori schooled or something like that?
Don't know.
I think public schools are probably the worst education institutions there could be.
I was going to say
simply because of the fact that
abuses like that are much worse in those places. Yeah, so perhaps that is an illustration of my point, that even in the places where it's the worst, you have the highest achievers.
Well, I'm not sure about that. How many do come from
those public schools? Those are
of course
worse abuse.
Of course, they have proportionately more students. That's for sure. But
no, I'm talking about the abuses, levels of abuses in those things, probably. But the point was that you have to learn to deal with what people say. They're only words. When we were tiny kids, we were told, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. This was a little rhyme. It's true. You choose whether words hurt you, but if somebody hits you with a stick, you're going to feel it, right? In theory, you can train yourself to turn off the feelings, and you won't even feel when you get hit by a stick, but it takes a lot more mental power to do that. But just to not react, when you're selling stuff, when you're in advertising, you're looking for the hot button, the thing that, and this is what, it's used in politics, it's used in diplomacy, everywhere. Yeah, Trump knows what the hot buttons are everywhere, and he knows how to push them.
So, not a comedian necessarily.
No,
an entertainer.
But that's what I'm saying. It's funny how if somebody says the things he says and says, I'm a comedian, they just laugh and say nothing. But so it's very interesting how our world is a hypocritical place in a lot of ways, and it's got to the point, and I think this is why we have these issues with Brexit, we have these issues with Trump actually getting into power and all these things, because when the media tells us that this is how it is and this is what people think generally, it turns out there's an awful lot of other people who have other thoughts, but they will never tell them because it's not politically correct to say so.
Or they are just not interested in sharing.
Mostly they're afraid to share because of the consequences that would happen.
You definitely have those as well. It's just that political processes are not that important anymore.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about politics politically correct. I'm talking about just general stuff. If you say certain things
Brexit and Trump were political outcomes in that way.
Yeah, but there are people who had opinions about, I don't know, immigration or whatever, because they were persuaded that these are the big issues, even if they were or they weren't.
For some, they were. That's the funny thing about it, right?
It's populism, though, isn't it? Right now, they're using populism as such a trend.
Probably depends on how you define populism, because so many times that's the thing. It's the same with those politically correct people. They try to label something just by their own feeling, by their own measure, right? And it's this other way around. What is nowadays something that would be called some despotism or any form of let's say useless political behavior, for instance. Because in a way, everything is. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, your government, my government was created when people drove around with horses, right? The structure hasn't changed. I mean, the legal principles that divide the powers of government are many centuries old. People wrote with feathers. So why would we actually be interested in politics in the 21st century if we can communicate directly, if we can actually do many things in an instant?
No, I agree. I think that the structure has to change because it's not necessary anymore.
And
A lot of it.
how do you feel about people who wear suits?
I used to wear a suit. Doesn't make any difference. It's just clothing.
But it's not convenient clothing, is it?
It depends. It wasn't a problem for me. I grew up
So
where
you're
I
used
went.
to it, right?
I went to school where when I started
wrong.
at 11 years old, I had to have a jacket because it had a uniform in the school.
Because I think most
But
of
there
the
are people who think wearing a suit is, oh, I'm not used to it. And
Because I think
it's
most
the
people,
tie, though.
Because I think most people who voted for, let's say, Trump or Brexit, those are the people who want convenience, and they went with their sports trousers to the voting ballot.
No, I think that's a very big generalization for the
For sure.
Brexit part, because I know people who would have wanted to get out and voted to leave. I didn't vote; I couldn't, but they are quite wide-ranging people, to be honest. And it's so I know a guy who was a CFO of a very serious company. He wanted to get out,
He's probably conservative.
He could be conservative. I don't know his political affiliation, but the Conservative Party itself was split. So there were half who wanted to be in, half who wanted to be out. Labour wanted to be in theory, but their leader was a person who wanted to be out for years. But it's a funny situation all round.
So does the Labour Party represent the Labour force?
Well, not anymore. It was supposed to in the old days, but if you look at how the political structures are these days, Labour occupies a place where the Conservatives used to be. So they pretty much took all of their policies from the old times, and the Conservative parties had to go even more right-wing to still be right-wing compared to them.
So what you feel, what would be the outcome if you had a requirement for all people who want to work in politics, let's say the higher tiers of government, that they need to have an IT background? All of them, 100%.
I don't know if they all should, but
if you want to be, let's say, prime minister.
No, but the point is, do we need to? Shouldn't we go even more radical? Why don't we change the voting system totally? Why don't we use?
Because then those IT guys will change it for you.
Well,
you'll have less work. You just need to vote one in, and the rest takes care of it all.
I don't know if we need IT guys specifically, but what I would like to see is a situation where we have regions and all these other things, and as you said, it's been set up for hundreds of years this way. A lot of it's down to people wanting to control their own little empire, and also because of just the mechanics of how you can count that many votes and all these things. But they're all used as tricks nowadays by moving the borders here and there and gerrymandering and all these other tricks.
It's possible in Great Britain as well?
Of course, everywhere.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they do all those sorts of things everywhere as far as I know. No, so what I would
sounds like it would be only in common law systems.
So what I would like to see is, firstly, the votes could be done on the blockchain, and then we would have votes which couldn't be manipulated, that are transparent and can be tracked, because the blockchain's basically a big distributed database of all the stuff. Everybody could be given one coin, which is their vote.
Wait a second, but it sounds like you are proposing an IT solution.
No, it's a tool. The IT part's a tool for doing it. I'm proposing a democratic system, kind of along the lines of Switzerland, where we can have referendums and things for certain aspects. But you
can have a referendum every once in a while.
Yeah, but there's no legal way of doing that right now in the UK unless.
Well, how was the Brexit done?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It can happen once in a while. It's once in 200 years or something. I don't know when.
You just have to fulfill some requirements to do a referendum, right?
Yeah, but I don't trust the system right now for counting votes. It's better in England because it's paper.
Yeah.
But in the US, it's really simple for the voting machines to be manipulated with, or at least it was.
Maybe, yeah.
And there's been...
Do you have any examples where voting works 100%? Probably not.
The way I'm telling you about, using blockchain and so on. There are
But
people,
does it work in Switzerland? Like
it's
that?
not physically done anywhere. That's the problem. But you know, I've some acquaintances in Hungary that are working on Ethereum and some other blockchain related things, and we have a conference there every year to cover all manner of things. And one of the streams was discussing cryptocurrency and so on, and we were looking at how to use cryptocurrency for voting, and I think it's a really useful thing. But you know, we can go further. Do we need all these politicians?
No. I mean, most of the
IT
time,
systems that we have, like the internet and
most
blockchain.
of the time, those people couldn't even do the job of their secretary.
Yeah, but they don't even.
So they are not really competent people in many ways.
It's one thing that they're not competent. It's another thing that they're supposed to represent their constituents,
Well,
but they simply don't.
Well, that they probably do.
No, they represent themselves. They just line their own pockets.
Yeah, because that's what their constituency would do if they would be in his place.
No, that may be the case in some countries.
I would just do it really smooth, so people feel it's still good.
But I think the simple thing is to get rid of them altogether and just have a system where, you know, the secretaries are basically administrators. Well, we can have people like that, but they have no power to do things, and we can vote on the different aspects, and it's all handled.
The effort is too much. If you need to have people voting really often,
I don't think we should. Yeah, I agree with that totally. I don't think we should have votes for every single thing.
You could somehow or another try to combine political processes with cute cat videos, and you'll have a winner.
Gamify it. They have to get points for
something like that.
For voting. Yeah.
Something like that. You need some incentives for those dudes. Yeah, I mean you can call off any moment. So
all right. Well,
if you want to wrap it up,
I have to wrap it up any minute because I should run to the airport in a minute.
Oh, all right. So 1 hour 2 minutes in, and I'll call it a wrap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well.